What's up, horror fans? It's Danny from the Lasso Cast, joined as always by my brother down south in Texas, Anchor Pete. What's going on, Pete?
Oh, not much, man. I am just enjoying this weather here in Texas. It's actually like cooling off right now. It's been raining. It's like 70 something. What's it like in New York right now?
Still muggy and hot. It's about 80 something. But much more than that, we are finally getting back to talking about why we started this channel in the first place 2 years ago during the pandemic. And I figured I had to wear appropriate attire as we return to the world of Mike Flanagan. We are going to be reviewing and talking about one of the only Mike Flanagan movies that we haven't talked about yet, OUIJA Origin of Evil from 2016. A movie that I credit with one of my all-time greatest theater experiences. And really, I think the movie that sold me that not only is Mike Flanagan a really good filmmaker, but he might just be that next guy in horror. Because I think Chris had got me started by telling me about Absentia, and then Oculus was around. I had actually fallen asleep during Oculus a couple different times, but I was like, all right, I'm going to give Oculus another try, and then love it. And then this was the movie where I was like, OUIJA, really? And this was the movie that I think really sold me on it. You just watched it for the first time, right?
I did, yeah. And it's kind of cool that it's on Netflix, right? Because you have this, you have Hush. Are there other Flanagan movies on Netflix?
I mean, he's basically married to Netflix and Kate Siegel. Obviously, Gerald's Game, Hush and Gerald's Game were direct to Netflix movies. And then, of course, Haunting of Hill House and Bly Manor and Midnight Mass are all on there. So it's almost a one-stop shop. Before I wake, after today, the only Flanagan movie that we have not covered, that is also on Netflix too. I know for a fact. Yeah. I'm not sure if Dr. Sleep is. I'm not sure about Dr. Sleep, but
I feel like that's on HBO Max because it's Warner Brothers, right?
Oh, okay.
Like a lot of Warner Brothers stuff is on HBO Max.
Yeah. So, OUIJA, like you said, I'm really glad it's on Netflix because this was a movie that wasn't available on streaming for a while. And it's actually funny. I just said before, one of my favorite theater experiences ever. I hadn't actually watched it again since the movie theater.
Okay.
So this is the first time this morning that I've rewatched this movie since 2016.
Oh, wow.
And I'm really glad that, at least in my opinion, it held up. And I genuinely love this movie. So I'm really interested to hear what you have to say about it.
Yeah, it's weird because when you think 2016, right? That's not really that long ago. When I saw that on the Wikipedia that came out in 2016, I was like, holy shit. Because think about all that he's done since this movie. It's every year he has a big thing that at least we're talking about, but Twitter's always talking about. We just had Midnight Mass, and he's got
the Midnight Club, Midnight Society.
That's coming out. Right. Then we had the Haunting of Bly Manor. Before that, Haunting of Hill House. I went through his filmography today so I could rank them at the end of this episode. It's just kind of, there you go. Why'd I have to even look it up? You just turn your shirt around. There you go. Perfect.
I was afraid I was going to moon the screen there. I don't know.
We might get more views. That's okay.
Huh?
But anyway, he's done so much in that small window of time. It's only been 6 years since this movie, but it feels like a decade. I mean, well, because of the real world too, but because of everything he's done since 2016. And so I found this felt more like Absentia than it felt like his more modern stuff, But I actually really liked this movie. You're a big wrestling guy. You know how there's that Vince McMahon meme where he's looking at the stripper or whatever it is, and he's had that face oh, and then his eyes turn red and blow up at one point. It's Mike Flanagan movies, oh. Mike Flanagan movie with the family issue. Oh, right. And then like Mike Flanagan movie with Henry Thomas. And then he just like falls out of his chair, you know?
Well, it's funny because this movie almost feels like a prequel, not to the far inferior Ouija, but it almost feels like a prequel to The Haunting of Hill House, because it's essentially the cast of Haunting of Hill House in this movie.
Yes.
And it's also, I mean, he's used the same crew from the beginning. Like the DP on this movie is Michael Fimagnari, who he's used on almost every project. He co-wrote this with Jeff Howard, who he co-wrote a lot of his earlier films with, including Oculus. Trevor Macy produced it. He produces almost all of his stuff. The Newton brothers do the score. It's like he very early on built himself a family, like the Flana family, you know,
right.
And we always talk about it. And that crew just continues to go to bat for him, acting, writing music, writing screenplays, cinematography wise. It really does feel almost like more of a prequel to Haunting of Hill House and the other Mike Flanagan filmography than it does to the movie it's actually a prequel for, which was really a piece of crap little movie based on a Hasbro board game, which is even funnier because, oh God, my cats are knocking things over. Have you even seen Ouija?
I have not seen Ouija, no.
Neither have I.
Oh, okay. Well, that explains a lot.
It is on HBO Max. I checked. And now that I watched this morning, I'm actually going to watch Ouija to see if maybe watching it after this. Because I'll be honest, I actually enjoyed the original Annabelle more after rewatching it, after watching Annabelle Comes... What was the second one? It was Annabelle Creation, and then Annabelle Comes Home.
Comes Home is the third one.
Yeah, and then I rewatched the original, and I was like, yeah, it's not great, but it works better after.
Yes.
And I happen to think that those are very similar because, you know...
That's what I was going to say, is it kind of feels like there was like a trend going on where you had The Conjuring, and it had that kind of feeling. Then you had Annabelle, and you had the prequel of Annabelle, which is like a, you know, taking place in like, what was that, like the 30s or 40s, the Annabelle creation?
Yeah, I think so.
Right? And it's kind of funny because that Annabelle prequel kind of has a similar ending to this movie too.
Yeah. Well, the other thing is they kind of just threw these like disposable horror movies out there. Ouija and Annabelle. You know, Possessed Doll, Possessed Board Game. Like, it almost feels like when Blumhouse threw out like Truth or Dare or movies like that, which they're going to make their money back on their opening weekend, but they're not going to be great. And, you know, okay. But then they hired young up-and-coming horror directors to do the prequels. Flanagan here, I don't remember his name, but I think it's the director from Lights Out who got, I want to say David Sandberg. That name sounds familiar.
That is the director. He's the one that's gone on to do Shazam. David Sandberg is the director of Lights Out.
Okay, he might have done Annabelle Creation.
Yes, he did. He did.
Okay, so it was like, you know, we made this disposable horror movie that made us our money back. Let's make a prequel to it, but actually, let's try to make that one good and hire a good up and coming horror director. You know, like you said, back in 2016, which feels like it was 40 years ago.
No kidding.
Mike Flanagan had only done Absentia, which was as bare bones a project as you can get, and Oculus, were his only two. 2016, he also did Hush and Before I Wake, but Before I Wake didn't actually get released until much later on. There were a lot of issues with that movie. I don't think it actually came out till 2018. And Hush was a direct-to Netflix movie. So this was his first theatrical movie. It was only his third movie. I think only the second one that came out in theaters, Oculus, and then this one.
Oh, okay, that's interesting. Yeah, yeah. It's weird. Before I Wake, I know like nothing about that one, and we keep mentioning it. I don't think I've ever seen a trailer, a poster, anything from it. This I'd heard about because so many times you and I have had these discussions of like, then he makes this random Ouija movie, and it's funny because like the first Ouija movie was a success because I mean, pretty much horror movies always are successes when they come out, right? Because they have small budgets, people just want to go see horror movies. But Ouija had like bad critical reception, right? And so Jordan Blum, I think, was the producer.
Jason Blum, yeah.
I'm sorry, Jason Blum. And he, was like, let's just get
Jason
Flanagan.
Peele and Jordan Blum.
Yeah. Perfect marriage, yeah. And so he brings them together. Wait, he doesn't bring them together. You just brought them together with your heads. He tells Flanagan to make this movie, and Flanagan didn't want it to have any connections really to the original movie. He just made like small little references, but he wanted it to be like he could come in fresh, like you and me, and appreciate it. And I think it's pretty tight. Honestly, I don't really have complaints or anything about this movie at all. Like there's not really criticism. Honestly, like I don't think I've ever had a criticism about a Flanagan project that we've reviewed on here. I mean, it makes sense that we are the Lasser cast because ultimately we have such reverence for him and his work.
Yeah. There's one scene in this movie that I didn't love.
Okay.
But even that one scene kind of corrects itself at the end.
Okay.
So like we haven't really talked about the plot yet. Yeah. So I guess let's get into the movie and we'll talk a little. So spoiler warning for a movie that came out 6 years ago. Basically, the first thing that you notice about this movie when it starts is how retro the movie feels, and that was intentional by Flanagan. He wanted this movie to feel like it was a 70s movie or a 60s movie, and it really does feel like that. Like you get the old Universal logo, and then like the OUIJA Origin of Evil is like framed. And I don't know if you noticed, did you see the cigarette burns in the top?
Yes.
It genuinely, and of course I know that because of Brad Pitt in Fight Club.
Right.
Yeah. But like it genuinely feels like you're watching, almost like you picked up a VHS tape and you put it in a VCR and you forget that you're watching it on Netflix, on like an HD TV. But it really has that retro vibe. Like it almost feels like the colors in the movie are not as bright. There's a lot of like kind of hunter greens and like it just kind of feels like the whole thing takes place at your grandmother's house. You know what I mean?
I do. Yes.
So I love that aspect of it.
Yeah.
And the cast, and like you said, with the Vince McMahon meme, what makes Flanagan so great is he makes these movies, but the horror comes especially because he gives you characters that you care so much about. So characters that are so easy to identify with, easy to empathize and sympathize with. And you actually care about them so that when these terrible things start happening, you actually feel worry for them.
Right.
So you have Elizabeth Reeser, who plays, she's the mom, and she's a hack psychic.
Yes.
What's the word that she gets called at the beginning that the daughter's like, are we not a fraud? Scam. Are we a scam?
Yeah. Absolutely. Alice Zander, right? So you got Alice Zander, Doris Zander, and Paulina Zander, and that's Lena.
Yeah. It's really funny. Instead of writing their names from this movie, I wrote down their character names from Haunting of Hill House. So I'm like, Elizabeth Reeser plays Shirley. And I'm like, no, she doesn't play Shirley. That's why.
You're right. And then, of course, Henry Thomas is in Hill House, too, but he plays Father Tom Hogan. You got a little cameo from Kate Siegel in the very beginning there.
Yeah.
Okay, there's my one criticism. I think Kate Siegel always looks awesome with her dark hair. Blonde hair was kind of throwing me off a little bit. That's my one criticism. beautiful woman. Just I was like, whoa, who's that? I couldn't tell at first, you know.
It's funny. It was jarring. I'm looking at her and I'm like, that looks like Kate Siegel, but I've never seen her blonde. Okay,
Right.
okay, it is. All right.
Yeah. You know, you brought up a really, really good point before about how we care about the characters, and I think that that's a really good point to kind of dwell on, because horror movies in general, it almost feels like they intentionally don't make the characters complex, or they're not as concerned with character development. So it's just not, you don't care. It doesn't feel adult. It doesn't feel mature. Flanagan stuff feels adult. It feels mature. You know,
Yeah.
I can think of other movies that we've seen where, you know, the characters seem developed and it feels like a drama versus just like people ready to kill. Right. For some reason, like the first thing that pops in my head is The Wicked and the Divine. Or not that's a fucking comic book. What's the Wicked, the guy that made
Dark and the Wicked.
There you go. I knew it was like something and Wicked, right? Yeah. Like that one, you really feel for like the family on the farm and the kids having to kind of take over for their fucking horrible parents situation. And that's just one example I can think of. That doesn't have as much dialogue as a Flanagan film does, but that kind of feeling, like, you know, when they talk about like the elevated horror bullshit, like the one company that puts out it's A24, right? They put out Men and X and all that kind of shit. Like that's where you get this kind of like character development. It's not just for the scares. Yeah. I don't think Flanagan's never made an A24 movie, right?
No, but like, but his work is very similar to that, because you get like, you know, like Ari Aster's work, like Hereditary.
Right.
Hereditary would not be as scary to me if I wasn't emotionally invested in Toni Collette as a mother and her kids, and you know, all the grief that's going on around them. I was just thinking of you said A24. Oh God, something just flew into my head and flew out of it. All right, but yeah,
maybe it was a spirit of like a Polish immigrant. Yes,
that was it was Hitler's devil doctor, right?
Right.
Yeah.
So we were kind of talking about like the plot. So essentially, Alexander, played by Elizabeth Reeser, you know, she's just trying to make ends meet, and she's got this very involved seance ritual that she has her daughters participate in. And you have the one daughter, Lena, who's kind of rebellious. She sneaks out of her house, and you know, she kind of talks back to her mom. But the other daughter gets interested in this Ouija board that they buy for the family, and they start to incorporate the Ouija board into the ritual, and it seems like it's authentic finally. And that's where we get this sort of Exorcist vibe. And I know that Flanagan said that one of his influences for this movie was The Exorcist, which kind of goes along with what you were talking about before, of feeling like a VHS tape instead of watching a VHS tape instead of watching Netflix. But he also mentioned a movie called The Watcher in the Woods. Have you seen that?
Oh my God. So this is 100% true story. That was the scariest movie I had ever seen when I was like 4 years old. And my mom tells me all the time that I would be scared, and she would say, "What are you scared of?" And I would go, "Look Watcher, Mommy, Look Watcher." It was a Disney movie with, I want to say, Betty Davis.
Okay.
And it's about like this creepy older woman and these kids. And, you know, it was one of those, like, Disney had a phase in the early 80s where they put out a lot of dark stuff.
Yeah.
Like The Black Cauldron and I think Return to Oz and like movies like that.
Yeah.
And that was part of that vibe. Like it came in like, you remember those big plastic VHS boxes? It came in one of those. Yeah, that movie scared the hell out of me when I was a kid. I have not seen it probably in 35 years, but I definitely saw it, and it definitely scared me when I was a kid.
Yeah, well, you know, that era, it's kind of funny because I actually just saw like a tweet where someone had all these clips from that Return to Oz. It was real dark, and I think that's probably when like Race to Witch Mountain came out and stuff too. I think that's another one. I mean, it's not really scary, but I think it's from that same kind of era. But what I was going to say to you was I kept thinking about another source of inspiration when I watched this movie. However, I think that this movie might have inspired something else versus the movie being inspired by this. I kept thinking about that episode of Lovecraft Country. Do you remember when we covered Lovecraft Country and there's the episode where they take over that house in the middle of the night, the white neighborhood?
Yes.
It kind of reminded me of that, where it was like you have these people that were tortured and stuff in this house, and then they're starting to like come out. Remember that? And so I wonder, because I know that Lovecraft Country, I can't remember when the book came out, but I wonder if that was inspired by this at all. You know?
Yeah, that was. I know which episode you're talking about, and yeah, because you know the whole movie, about 75% of the movie, you're thinking that there's like this one, either a demon or there's some kind of whatever it is possessed this little girl using the Ouija board. She like used the Ouija board to access spirits, and this one spirit possesses her. There's that one scene, what is it, about 35, 40 minutes into the movie, where like you're starting to see like hints of things. There's black shadows in the background. There's all this creepy stuff, but nothing outwardly horror has happened.
Right.
And then Lulu Wilson, who plays Doris, who's fantastic in this movie.
Agreed.
She is looking through the planchette, and there's the black demon, and he like reaches down her throat, and her mouth like opens wide, and it's this terrifying sequence. And you think that is the only evil entity in the house, and you really find out that later on, the big, like, I guess, reveal is that their house, their family home, was built on the remnants of this Nazi war criminal who fled to the United States and was doing these horrible experiments to people in the basement, cutting their tongues out, sewing their mouths shut, leaving them in the dark, and it's all of the spirits of that house are like coming alive to get this family now, and they're using Doris as like a conduit, and it's I mean it. I love that feeling at the end where, because really like the whole last 30 to 40 minutes, the father goes to the house, and you think, oh, this is going to be like the thing that leads to, because he goes to get the seance for his wife, and you think this is going to be what sets up the final stage in a movie. In a way it does, but they never leave the house again. They go upstairs, they're like, all right, what's really going on here? And then they realize there's this great juxtaposition of he's telling them the story while the daughter downstairs, Lulu Wilson, is taking the boyfriend downstairs to like uncover the bones.
Yes.
And then that's really it. They never leave the house again. It becomes almost like an exorcism like fight between, this Polish Nazi devil doctor and the family in the last like third of the movie. And it's really scary as hell. There's typically great Mike Flanagan jump scares in this movie. Like you really see just how little sound he uses to set up some of these moments.
Yeah.
Like the body falling, the boyfriend hanging himself, and there's no music involved whatsoever. So many of the instances where you see that black demon, he just shows up.
Yeah.
Oh man.
So you said before that this movie was one of your best theater experiences, and I'm assuming it has to do with that scene where you first see the girl kind of get possessed, where her head just like shoots backwards, her jaw becomes super wide. Yeah.
Oh no! I got they were doing a screening of it in the city, and it was like critics and writers were down on the bottom in like the first 10 rows, were like roped off for like in people who were invited, like I guess critics mostly, and then the rest were just free tickets given out. And the theater was packed, probably like 200, 300 people, most of which were just people given the tickets for free. Now, usually that could backfire because you'll get like people making noise, like, hey, a free ticket to a movie, who cares? The best way I could describe it is, you know, like when there's a commercial for a new horror movie and they show the crowd watching the movie.
Yeah.
That's what it felt like. Every moment where, every jump scare, every moment where the crowd is supposed to go, ah! The crowd did that on cue.
Yeah.
And as a horror fan, it just felt right. It was perfect. Like every horror moment hit 110%. There were literally people screaming in the movie theater multiple times. Yes, the moment where the Lulu Wilson gets attacked by the demon and her mouth opens and the hand goes in. When the boyfriend falls hanging. The moment, oh my God, when the boyfriend's dead body grabs the girl, like swings out while still hanging, and like that moment killed it in the movie theater. It was just, look, we all know there are times where you go to the movies and the crowd ruins the movie.
Yes. Oh, absolutely.
It's just a crowd that doesn't want to be there. You know, why'd you even come here? Why'd you waste all this money? And then there are times where a crowd elevates a movie.
Right.
I would have loved Avengers Endgame no matter what. But listening to that crowd or like Spider-Man No Way Home, when you hear those crowds erupt, it makes you feel like you're part of something bigger than just sitting in a movie theater.
Right.
That's what this was for me in horror. Like I had never been in an experience like that where I felt like I was in a trailer for, this is the scariest movie ever made. Look at the crowd and everybody's screaming. It was great. Yeah.
It's funny because like Netflix, when you look at the picture for Netflix for this movie, it is Doris with her mouth wide open like that, right? And I kind of hate that because if I didn't know that she was going to look like that at one point, and I'd seen that scene where her head shoots back like that, and that would have freaked the fuck out of me. And like, it makes me think about Mike Flanagan and the way that he handles scares, because you mentioned sound before and the lack of sort of music. That's sort of that cliche, oh, here comes the scary, here comes the jump scare. He doesn't do that, right? It's more like he really, really gets you into the reality of the situation. He really makes you just think this is a drama. It's a drama, and you're kind of expecting scares that are akin to it being a drama. Like, oh, maybe it'll be like you'll see like a little ghost and it'll be creepy. But no, it's like you're so invested in this drama, and then all of a sudden it's like this super disturbing, weird thing that it takes a moment for you to wrap your head around. Like, because when she like shoves her head back and like, you're like, what the fuck is going on? You don't even really understand what's going on in that moment. And I think that's the beauty of it, because it's like your expectations. You go into a certain type of horror movie, you expect a certain type of scares, and his are kind of like off. It's like he's got these like really dramatic kind of like slow burn things, but then when you see the actual horror, like Midnight Mass, not a movie, right? I remember watching Midnight Mass, and there's this great drama, and you're just watching these episodes, and it's all about this addict and what's going on in this village and all these different, Raul Cooley and his son, all this kind of stuff, right? But then you get to that scene with the fucking church, and you're like, what the hell am I watching? It's like one of the most disturbing things. Like Dr. Sleep. Dr. Sleep has some disturbing stuff, some weird stuff right away, absolutely. But then you get to Baseball Boy, and it's like you feel this kind of comfort or safety when you're watching Flanagan movies for a little while, but then he goes way dark and deep real quickly. Would you agree with that, or you think I'm off?
Yeah. I think that's one of the things that elevates him is like he plays on real life. You know, essentially, again, this is a movie about an evil board game, and there's possessions and demons. And there's stuff that is completely supernatural and completely fictional, but the way he handles it, it all feels like this is real world stuff. And and it's all based on, it's there's always an element of grief in his movies. There's always an element of religion in his movies, and dealing with that, or in his projects, and it all feels like these are real people going through a real situation, even though it's obviously completely fictional. Like you brought up Dr. Sleep. It's about like essentially, energy vampires. But you're watching a little kid get brutally murdered. You're like, wait, what is this?
Yes. Yeah. I mean, we obviously love him so much on this channel, and it's just with good reason that the violence that he does, it's never this kind of tasteless, sensational violence. It's always like, God, this is so awful. And it's awful on the brutality level, but it's also awful on like the emotional level. Because that baseball boy scene is brutal to watch, but then it's also just so upsetting because you're thinking about like how that boy feels, right? And I guess we probably should have said spoilers for Dr. Sleep too. Sorry. If you ever think Dr. Sleep, you probably have if you're watching a review of this movie. But to convey those emotions, you really need stellar actors. And goddamn, has he made the right choice of casting Henry Thomas. It's so funny because like on my YouTube feed, for some reason, I always get this one video of Henry Thomas auditioning for E.T. Like for some reason, like YouTube thinks I always want to watch that for some reason, right? And he's just got something, man. And in this, he's able to play this priest that you can tell, has gone through things in his life. And then at the end, he kind of is the one that starts to give you some of that exposition. And he's kind of explaining, oh, this is how I know everything is wrong with your daughter. I know what's going on. And with a lesser actor, it would come off as hokey, or you'd almost feel like the movie had taken a left turn when he starts saying like, oh, well, I thought this, I just kept thinking this name. If another actor was saying that, you'd be like, oh, all right, this is a little cheesy, but it's because it's Henry Thomas. So good,
Yeah. I mean, and that goes back to, him using, and when he finds these actors, he doesn't let them go.
Right. Yeah. I mean, okay. The mom is the sister in The Haunting of Hill House, right?
Yeah. She's
the funeral director.
Yes. And Kate Siegel's her younger sister.
Right. So then who is Lena in Hill House?
Lena, Annalise Basso, she was the younger daughter in Oculus. She was the young redhead.
Okay. So she's not in Hill House?
I'm not sure. Right. But she's but she was in. Yeah, she's the one that grows up to be
Amy
Gillan,
Pond.
Karen Gillan.
Karen Gillan, there you go. I was thinking of her Doctor Who name, Karen Gillan. Yeah.
And what's really funny is in Hill House, Lulu Wilson is young Shirley, and Elizabeth Reeser is older Shirley. So they're playing, and Henry Thomas, of course, plays
his dad.
Lulu Wilson's dad in Hill House.
Yeah. Wow. Yeah. He really struck. He's just one last thing too is that he's very, very good at casting child actors too. He knows what he's doing there. Yeah. We've said that before on this channel though. Yeah.
You reminded me when you brought up Henry Thomas, and you also mentioned that like one of his inspirations was The Exorcist. There's that scene at the end when he's walking up the steps with the knife and he's like temporarily possessed. That is that, I mean, that feels like Father Karras at the end of The Exorcist.
Completely agree.
And then like the way he shuts the door to like save them, take me, is like almost Father Karras jumping out of the window at the end.
Yep.
And they both kind of end up in the same position at the bottom of the stairs.
Yes. Yes.
You know, dead at the bottom of the stairs, you know?
Yes.
So, I loved Henry Thomas in this. They even, you know, like, again, I feel like a lesser movie would have done a more overtly romantic story between him and the mom.
Yeah.
Whereas here, it's very obvious that she has feelings for him. They've both lost their partner. They both have that grief. She gets all dressed up to go out and meet him at the restaurant. So, like, there's obviously like a connection there, but this movie just plays it like real people instead of, you know, having there be this weird romantic side plot that makes you almost feel awkward because he's a priest. And
right.
So, like, they don't play into that at all.
Yeah.
I am curious that I mentioned earlier the scene that I didn't really love in this movie, because you said, and you're right, and this is the thing that I always come back to, because Chris is the one who first pointed out Flanagan to me, and he was the one that said, hey, you got to check out this movie. Oh God, what was his first movie called?
Absentia.
He goes, you have to check this movie Absentia out on Netflix.
Yeah.
And what Chris said to me was, it's a horror movie with no cliches.
Oh, yes.
I went, that you're full of shit, can't happen. And that's what blew me away about that movie, and that's what got me started on my Mike Flanagan journey.
Right.
This movie also, almost throughout the entire movie, is free of cliches.
Right.
And the only scene that really bugged me, and it didn't bother me, like it doesn't ruin the movie for me at all.
Yes.
But is the dream sequence where Lena's mouth starts to close up.
Okay. Yes.
And it kind of looks like a hokey special effect in a movie that doesn't really, even the demons look mostly practical with maybe some like, so that one scene, it almost felt like the studio said you needed that scene in there.
Yeah, for a trailer or poster
exactly.
art. Yeah.
It even has like she's looking in the mirror in the bathroom, which is one of the more like cliche setups for a scare that you could have. But that scene kind of fixes itself at the end when she realizes that like the whole sewing of the mouth and like the shutting of the mouth is important to stopping the evil, or at least containing it a little bit.
Yeah.
At the end.
So that I'm glad that you brought that up, because I do think that it was maybe made for like poster art, or it was made for trailer. However, that I feel like that image has always kind of stuck with people, because I mean it's in Doctor Strange and the Multiverse of Madness. I just watched something else. I watched an episode of Buffy with my kid where like a cheerleader lost her mouth. I think that like ever since the Matrix, the first Matrix with Keanu, that's just kind of been embedded in our collective unconsciousness. But one of the things about Flanagan that's very, very interesting is that when he goes full on supernatural, he kind of makes up his own rules, or he, has like a specific type of thing that he's doing with the ghosts and stuff, or with the haunted house. And in this, he's really playing with the idea that you can get almost like poisoned by the whispers of spirits. Like when the spirits are kind of like whispering in your ear, it makes your eyes turn white. And that like essentially to stop the evil, you have to sort of sew up a mouth, right? That's what the dad has died. And so we see visions of him a couple of times throughout the movie. And at one point, Lena has a flashback where she sees, or is it, well, it's either Doris or Lena. They see where the dad, it's Lena. Because he stitched up a doll's mouth. And Lena gets mad at Doris. She's like, "Why? That's from Dad. You messed up her mouth." And he said that that's to keep the voices out or whatever, to turn off the voices. And so that is such a, like, the idea of like, speak no evil, hear no evil. That's a big thing in this whole movie. And it's just so well done. It, of course, could have been very corny and over the top in another filmmaker's hands. But like, he does a thing with eyes. Like, eyes are a very important thing for Flanagan. You know, when you have the True Knot in Doctor Sleep, they have that kind of glow in their eyes. The glow is very similar to the spirits in Oculus. And then in this, it's just like full-on white, kind of clouded eyes, you know? And I think in here, the full-on white kind of represents that like a spirit has like taken you over completely, you know? And so just visually, the way that they handle possession in this movie is very well done.
Yeah. I will say this movie was kind of lacking on hand assault and hand damage.
It wasn't, though. In the very end, the mom is handcuffed to the table, and then she like rips her hand out. You remember that part?
Oh, did she break her own wrist to get out?
Something happens to her because they don't really show it. Like, they just kind of show red lines on her wrists at the end, but she does kind of go like this. There's a part where she goes like, ah, and pulls her hand out. Yeah.
I would kind of expect her, like, the skin of her hand to come completely off. And
yeah.
I almost
it's
feel
no
like
Gerald's game.
Flanagan's going to have, like, a scene, like, remember Terminator 2 when Arnold goes to show Miles Dyson?
Yeah.
And he,
that's
the last thing for Flanagan, where he's just going to be like, oof, and there's going to be a character sitting with, like, bone fingers.
Right.
Like, here's my skeleton hand.
Yes.
Yeah.
So let's talk about the very end, because we kind of talked about the stitching. So essentially, the way that the movie ends is that Doris, like, you see right down her throat at one point, and you see kind of like, I guess this is like the nexus of where the spirits are or whatever. And
the Eye of Sauron.
Right, it is very much like the eyes. That's a good point. Yeah. And so Lena comes up with the idea of, I'm going to sew her mouth shut, and that's going to make this all end. And so you have the sequence where she's like going like this with like a crooked kind of needle. And meanwhile, like, the spirits are coming up around her. And I was like, whoa, this is full on like demonic kind of James Wan kind of stuff going on right here. And then they're able to sew up the sister's mouth, and then the sister dies. And then there's like, in so many Flanagan stories, when like a main character dies, you kind of get that scene where like they're with a loved one, or they kind of have a happy moment, even though in the real world they're physically dead. That's happened in a lot of his movies and shows. And then the sister goes to a mental institution, and that very last shot in the mental institution, that is gold, man. I love that last shot.
Yeah. I actually like the, are you talking about with Doris on the ceiling? Mm-hmm. See, I actually like the scene right before that, as it's like the long unbroken take of the guy walking down the hall, and he walks past her room, and she's sitting on the bed with Doris.
Oh, yes, yeah.
And he stops and is like, huh? And then he goes back, and then she's just boom right there at the door, like staring at him. And then the camera pans out. It's all one great, it's like one final, good luck going back to your car, right, after seeing this in the movie theater. This movie is, I'm so glad that I enjoyed it as much as I did sitting alone in my living room as I did with like hundreds of other people in a crowded movie theater 6 years ago, because I've always held this movie up towards the top of my Flanagan rankings.
Yes.
Because of that theater experience. And I was always afraid if I rewatched it, it wouldn't hold up as much, but it really does. It's really good. And I love the retro feel. I love the cast. I love the way he uses the minimalist sound that he uses with the score. It's so good. Everything about it.
Well, I mean, it sounds like you're setting up a segue right there, man, to our ranking. You want to rank the Flanagan films?
Oh boy. So what do we got? 7 of them, right?
Yes, and the problem is I haven't seen one of the 7, so I haven't seen Before
All
I
right, so
Wake.
how about since Before I Wake is the last one that we have, let's just rank the other 6.
Good.
Okay. So you want to go first?
Sure. Yeah. Okay, I'm going to start from least favorite to favorite. Okay.
Okay.
So, all right. This movie is actually my least favorite out of all of them. That's because you say this pretty much every time we do these rankings. It's like all of them are good. It's not like one of them is bad, right? So I like Gerald's Game more. Then I like Oculus more than Gerald's Game. I like Hush better than Oculus. Absentia has a place in my heart because I feel like that's where I got to see the forming of Mike Flanagan. It's like kind of like this is who he becomes, right? And I feel like it's very personal for him. And I love that. What's his face is in it too? The tall, skinny guy that's like,
Doug Jones. Doug Jones is in this too. He plays I think he plays the main dark spirit.
Oh, well, what the fuck? I got to put this as number 2 then. No, but OUIJA, Origin of Evil, Gerald's Game, Oculus, Hush, Absentia, and then Dr. Sleep. That's just like, I feel like, I love Absentia. It's the beginning for him. Dr. Sleep is sort of like the pinnacle. It's where he's gotten to so far with film. I'm not including any of his shows, which I think some of his shows are better than a lot of these. But as far as just movies, that's my ranking.
Yeah, it really is. It's getting to a point where it's harder to rank Flanagan movies than it is like MCU movies because
right.
Because we always talk about it would be so much easier if he would just make a shitty movie that we could say, all right, well, that's the one at the bottom. Like there's no Thor the Dark World here.
Right.
So again, I feel like any movie that goes on the bottom of my list is still a 4-star movie. It's like It starts at 4 stars and then it goes up to like 5+.
Yeah.
So I would probably put Absentia at the bottom only because it's you so easily see how he's progressed since then in every movie. I feel like I would love to see him remake Absentia now.
Yes.
Like, not do anything crazy different, but just now that he's much more established, now that he can get a much bigger budget, to almost take the exact movie and just kind of do it over. And like, I'm sure it actually wouldn't be as good because it would, that's part of the charm of Absentia is how, bare bones and minimalist it feels.
Right.
But yeah, I think only because his work has progressed so much as he's moved on.
Yeah.
I think Absentia would be down towards the bottom.
Okay.
Then I would probably go Oculus only because there's parts of Oculus that do kind of drag for me ever so slightly.
Sure.
Then I would put this and Hush are almost a coin flip for me. They're both like 90 to 95 minutes. They just get to the point. I love them both. I think I would put this above Hush just because of that feeling I have towards my theater experience. It elevates this movie to me. Also because, again, I can't get over the fact if there was ever a way for me to have less than no expectations for a movie, like walking into that movie theater that day and thinking I'm seeing the prequel to OUIJA.
Yeah.
What the hell am I doing here?
Yeah.
And then to see this movie, it adds that much more. Like if you go on, like I have Roku, and I was like, I go to search and I type in OUI.
Yeah.
And you should see what comes up.
Uh-oh.
It's like you know, like have you ever seen like the Amityville stuff where it's like now they're doing like Amityville in space and Amityville dog show, and it's just all these bizarre products. Ouija has Ouija, Origin of Evil. Then there's like Ouija 3. Then there's the Ouija Experiment and the Ouija Experiment 2. Then there's Ouija Shark. And like there's like 25 titles of low budget, you know, indie horror with Ouija in the title. So
there's
it's
Ouija
like,
Shark?
Yeah, there's definitely a Ouija Shark.
Yes. Like, how does that work? Did they do a Ouija board and like a shark shows up in their house? Like, what?
There's a shark movie for everything.
I guess so. Yeah.
But yeah, so like the idea that this was a prequel to a crappy little Blumhouse movie that made its budget back, and nobody had any expectations that it was going to be good, it elevates it ever so slightly over Hush for me. Even though I love Hush and it's amazing. And then I would go Gerald's Game and Dr. Sleep. Yeah. Because to me, Dr. Sleep is a modern masterpiece. It is a legitimately great film, aside from being a great horror movie. It was probably one of my top movies of, what was that, 2018 or 19 when it came out? 2019.
I think it was like pre-COVID, right?
Yeah, I think it was 2019. It was so good, and it's also the only movies where the director's cut, which is 30 full extra minutes, making it a 3-hour movie, makes it even better.
Yeah.
And I've watched the director's cut twice. It's never boring. It's consistently scary. I love it. It's, to me, that is the peak of cinematic Flanagan, is Dr. Sleep. If we were including the shows, I would genuinely put the 3 shows as my numbers 1, 2, and 3. Because I think they're all absolutely perfect from beginning to end. I have not a single complaint about any of the 3 series on Netflix, and I cannot wait for Midnight Society to come out.
Oh, yeah. We'll be covering that when that comes on the channel, too. And, you know, actually, our channel has its own Twitter account now, too. And one of the posts that we put on there was, what is your favorite Mike Flanagan movie? And I think that Danny and I were the only 2 to contribute. So if you guys have watched this whole episode, find out. We're the Lassercast on Twitter. Just go find us and tell us your favorite Flanagan movie. And if you've gotten to this point, you haven't subscribed to our channel, I mean, please do. Danny and I talk like this, you know, every week or so. And we also do author interviews as well. What are some of the things that you have coming up in the pipeline?
Well, it's spooky season. Shudder released a whole bunch of new things starting this week. I'm really, really excited. Bravo years ago did the 100 scariest movie moments, and it was like a big deal for horror fans. Shudder is doing the 101 scariest horror moments. I think they're doing it in 4 episodes throughout the rest of September. The first episode, I believe, comes up on Thursday the 7th. Today is Monday the 5th.
2 days from now.
Oh, so it's the 8th. Thursday the 8th.
Oh, 3 days from now. Yeah,
so we'll be covering Shudder's 101 scariest movie moments. We also have a ton of other things coming up in terms of Chucky season 2 is coming out on USA. There's the new Hellraiser movie, which is coming out in October. It's September going into October. Charlotte and I are super excited to be going to making our first Spirit Halloween trip.
Yes.
We already went to Party City, and they had a much better than average horror section. So we were very excited. I'm trying to get some new stuff for the section. I'm running out of room. but
Yeah.
I'll figure it out. I'll
Yeah.
figure it out.
Yeah, and Danny also went to a cool museum called the Grave Face Museum, and he sent me the footage of like him talking about it and the pictures. I need to edit a video that'll go up this week. I actually interviewed Keith Lansdale, writer. He wrote The Pale Door, and he wrote Christmas with the Dead, and he's written stuff with his father, Joe Lansdale. I still need to edit that video and get that up on the channel, but I will do that this week. I've been kind of busy recently, but we should get some videos out this week too.
Go
ahead.
I go back to work tomorrow. I did a lot of traveling the last couple weeks. We were in Savannah, and then we just spent the weekend in Delaware. So work starts tomorrow. So I'll be looking for all the reasons in the world to not think about teaching starting literally tomorrow.
Yeah. Well, that's good. That means that we're gonna have a lot of content on this channel. Danny posts a video at least once a week on this channel, but we usually have more. So please, if you haven't already subscribed, please do. And we will see you guys on Thursday night.